Hi, welcome to an Orms live stream. We are XCIV. I'm Hloniphiziwe Coleman and this is Luke Bell. And we're here to talk to you guys about lensing. All the lenses, actually. It's very weird that we attempt to cover an entire genre in photography. But today we're going to talk about prime lenses, we're going to talk about zoom lenses, and hopefully by the end of it we'll give you guys some insight onto how to choose a lens for your next creative project. Now, to give you guys a bit of an overview of what we're going to do, we're going to cut to my screen and we're going to just see like what are we going to cover during this talk. So you guys can There we go. Okay, I believe we're back. Hopefully you guys can hear. If you can't hear us, please post in the comments. We've got someone listening right there. Yeah, jumping in. Luke, what are lenses? Let's go there. What are lenses? What are interchangeable lenses? And then what are primes and what are zooms?
So lenses are kind of the crux of photography, and any photographer or videographer is generally obsessed with lenses and will probably spend all of their money on their lenses. As you should. I'm not disagreeing with that. But basically with lensing, there's two options, and you've either got your primes or your zooms. And we've got some examples here. And basically all it means is, a lot of people think a zoom lens is something that can zoom in really far and see something far away, but that's actually not what it means at all. Basically all it means is you've got a variable focal length range on the lens, which means you can change from wide to tight, or ultra wide to a little bit tighter, or from telephoto to even more telephoto. And zoom lenses can get as wide. Currently the widest zoom lens in the world is the 12 to 24 f2.8, and they can go up to as tight as around 200 to 600 millimeters, and that basically covers all the ranges you could need. But then on the other hand, we've got prime lenses. Now the difference with those is that you can't zoom in and out of your frame. You've got one focal length. So it's like when you open up a phone camera and you've only got one focal length option, you can't zoom in and out of your lens. And you might think, well, why would you want that? That's just super irritating. Well, the difference is, number one, they're lighter, generally speaking. And then number two, they're also faster, which means they've got a wider aperture, which means basically two things. It means you're going to get more bokeh in your shots, which means that you're going to get that really nice blurry background, which all photographers love and looks really, really good. And then secondly, it also means you can shoot in worse lighting conditions. Because what it actually means is the iris of the lens opens up more, which allows more light onto the sensor, which means you can use lower ISO, shoot in darker environments, and all of that. But then, of course, the trade-off is that you're not going to have the zoom range, and you might need to swap out lenses during shooting. So it's not always ideal. Yeah.
I think an important thing to think about as we move forward, and we're definitely going to have some good visual examples for you guys, but just remember that the lower a focal length, so let's say Luke talked about the 12 to 24,
Yes,
that
good
means
point.
it's the more you can see, right? So the lower it is, it's the more you can see, and then the higher the focal length, it's the further you can see and also the tighter it is, right? So as we talk about these things, that's something important to keep in mind. And on that note, we have a really good example of focal length differences and just a bit of a progression coming up on your screen. And we'll talk through these different options because there's two different things to consider when you change focal length, and it's not always that obvious. So let's show you. Cool. So if we go from left to right, these are all of these are an example of a portrait, right? Some of these are very different. Obviously, there's different stylistic things, but we're capturing a person, right? Now, on the left-hand side, we're going from smallest focal length, so let's call this 12 millimeters, to furthest focal length. So right at the right-hand side, it's 200 millimeters. And at the left-hand side, you've got a super wide, right? You've got a photo that you can only take when it's super wide, because also the physical space you can get your camera in is quite small. So you want your camera to see as much as possible, right? Then next we've got a wide. So I want to be able to capture the climber himself, the mountain he's on, and maybe a little bit of the view. But I'm also on the rock face with him. So having a wide angle lens is great. I don't need to be super wide, and I don't necessarily want to have him be very large in the frame, but I want to feel the rest of the space that he's in. Next, we've got our kind of standard focal length. I'd say that's at 50, and that's the most common focal length for taking photos of people. This is also the focal length that's most similar to what your eye sees, right? Now, when we're going to move into how you think what the subconscious implications of using lenses are as well. And this is a really good space to see that shot, it has the separation, it has the size of a person, but it's also got a compression that feels natural to the human eye because it's similar to what you see day to day. Lastly is a very nice shot that Luke took of me at 200. And again, it's about bringing the landscape in, right? You want to see me in the distance, you want to feel me, but you also want to feel everything leading up to me. And if we were shooting with a wide, we could make me small, but we couldn't necessarily bring in the entirety of the landscape in the foreground, as well as the entirety of the landscape in the background. Now, Luke's going to chat to you guys about the next slide, which is a great video created by it is created by a full-time filmmaker as reposted on Filmmakers on Instagram. And it's the perfect way to show you that it's not just about how much of the photo you're capturing. Your different focal length completely changes the characteristics of what you see in the video.
Yeah, so here he's basically covering the full focal range of 16 to 200 millimeters. And it's kind of shocking how different one person can look. So a lot of people say, well, I don't need zooms, I zoom with my feet. And I don't know if that totally works all the time, because as you can see, you get a really, really different characteristic in the image and how it looks depending on the range. And as Hloni said, right in the middle, around 50 millimeters is the most similar to the human eye. But you really need to decide for yourself what you want to what look you want in your video or photo, because it really can make a big difference. And going to 16, it is tempting to always go for those wides, but you also need to remember that you don't want to make your subject look like a fish.
Yeah. So coming back to us, this isn't something to get sad about, right? People often freak out when they see how much people's faces are warped. But once you understand both focal length and how to use it in composition, but then also the compression that comes along with that, you can invoke emotion using that compression. I think there's some really great examples where traditionally, right, we shoot people at 50, But we shoot villains at 16, right? We shoot villains at 24 because they're unsettling, they're warped, they're in your face, they're in your personal space. And that's a great way of pulling emotion from people, right? We often see superhero shots, and while you could shoot those at 50, a lot of those are shot at a wider focal length beneath them to make them larger, make them imposing in the frame. And then one of my favorite examples is if you guys know the film Fargo, they shot a lot of Fargo, even the portrait shots. They shot that at 70 and beyond, right? They shot those on long focal length zooms because that's the lens language of documentary filmmaking, right? And because Fargo is this fantastical tale that the Coen brothers were wanting to put forward to us as this true story, they used lensing as a way to convince us that it's a true story because subconsciously we think it's a documentary film. Any particular favorite uses of lensing for you?
Ooh, well, the one film that does come to mind is The Revenant. Basically because they did what I don't think anybody's really done it before, and they only used ultra-wide lenses for the whole film. And it worked really well because even if it's just subconscious, nothing looks like it would normally look to the human eye because you get that actual distortion as we saw in the previous video. And it's just amazing to see a film entirely shot in that, because the entire film is really unsettling and you never know what's going to happen and is he going to die? Is this bear going to rip his face off? So in that sense, I think using those ultra-wide angle lenses really, really worked. And yeah, it was just a great choice in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think it did win Best Cinematography.
It did.
It?
He
Yes.
and he won 2 years in a row. So I think
he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. I think a great example of this, we didn't put it in, but I definitely encourage you guys to go watch Nerd Writer's video on Toy Story 4. I feel bad
that's
talking
beautiful.
about all these dour movies, but if you watch that video, you see how important bringing real lens characteristics into an animated movie are, because Pixar understands what those lenses, what the different use of lenses does to our subconscious. So there's Fargo,
beautiful.
there's Revenant, and then I think we've pasted over those depressing overtones with Toy Story 4. So we are going to first look at primes because, yeah, I mean, they're left on the table. And I think that something that people also don't think about is the way that you use these lenses. It will completely change how your set goes day to day, right? You might not work on a professional set. You might work by yourself. And it might be to your benefit to use primes or zooms because of those reasons. Lucas.
Yeah, so our next slide is a couple shots from a music video that we did recently. And all of these shots were actually shot in the 24mm G Master lens, which I've got in front of me. And yeah, you can see there 24 is a really nice focal length because you get a lot of your frame and the subject matter, but you don't get to that like distortion-y look that we saw earlier. So it's a challenging focal length, and it's one that not a lot of people use, but you can get really unique imagery from it. And this was actually also shot in it actually could be a bit more exposed, but it was in a entirely dark room, and we shot at 12,800 ISO on the S3, and it was incredible. Yeah. This is a great example of using the 24 to its best, because you can actually get the full depth of the table and this meal that's in front of her and capture her at the same time. And yeah, I feel like that's a great use of the 24.
Yeah.
And then this one is one you did, walking down the passageway. It's also very cool.
Yeah. I think that an important thing to touch upon is that prime lenses achieve f-stops that no other lenses can, right? So something I really enjoyed about this is one, the music video itself was visually consistent, right? Even though we were moving from space to space, it had a specific look and lens language because we kept the focal length consistent. And then also, cutting back to me, also we had the ability to move between those spaces because we're able to bring that lens down to 1.4, right? You don't need that 1.4 outside, but yeah, the 24, a prime lens, is the only lens we could have shot some of those spaces in. And it means that you also, we have great low light cameras. I mean, we shot it on the A7S III, and not like a lot of those shots I wouldn't have attempted before. But also, it's not just about like, can you do the shot, right? It's, can you do the shot and have lighting scenarios that are true to the story you're trying to tell. So you don't need to pull in all this artificial lighting. That shot down the passageway is literally lit with candlelight. Yeah, and it's really phenomenal. You don't think about versatility when you think of a prime lens, because you think a zoom's going to give me more versatility. But the fact that you can go from shooting outside into pitch black, and you never have to worry, like, is this too dark? Because your prime lenses will typically be faster as in letting more light in. That's really something that people don't think about.
Yeah, and just one more to touch on is that you can see how small this lens actually is. I mean, yeah. It's tiny, and it's f1.4, so it's one of the fastest lenses you can get, and which makes putting it on something like a gimbal like this really nice, because you don't want to destroy your wrists.
Yeah. I think something that people don't think about is that, like, yeah, shooting is, it's a physical activity. It's
tiring.
It's very tiring. And if you set up in a way, like, prime lenses are a great way to make a very light camera rig, right? If you put the 51.8 on there, you've got an incredibly light package. And what it means is that, let's say your cast, let's say your director is trying to get a very specific shot, or let's say you're shooting a wedding, right? Your fatigue will never get in the way of getting that shot, right? That if you use heavier lenses, if you use zooms unnecessarily, if you bring them into that space, you might tire yourself out before the thing you're trying to capture is ready to be captured, right? So we always try to reduce the pressures on our shooters, and using a light setup with a prime is a great way of doing that. Now, a bit of a difference is something to think about, is that primes, and I'll definitely explain this later, primes slow down your workflow. They do. If you were going to do a film where you're going to use multiple different focal lengths, and you want to use primes, you're going to need to change your lenses in between that shot. And I'll touch on it when we talk about zooms, but there's things that happen when you change your lensing, especially on a big set. And also, if you are one person, right, you physically then most likely have to put the camera down, or even I've got quick release systems, but it's this juggling exercise. But if you've got a film that you want to create these like striking motifs, right, you want to have very different looks to invoke very different feelings, and you have the time to switch that, primes are a great way to create those very distinct visual spaces and also those very distinct feelings as that's going on. So that's what our next piece is, and we'll show you that right now. So this is... Turn it up, that's my jam, I feel good. How you feeling? I feel good. So good. Comfortable in my own skin. I like who I am. Good vibes keep on bumping. Turn it up, that's my jam, I feel good. How you feeling? I feel good. So good. 2.8. And this is the A7S III on the drone, so everything captured here is there. And I think that an important thing to think about is when we speak about that compression, when you shoot on a long lens, you see your subject, but you bring everything that is before your subject into frame, right? So our biker might be going past, that's the end? Yeah. Our biker might be going past, but if you shoot on a nice long lens, you see everything in between zoom past him, right? And a lot of people use wide lenses to imply movement, right? But especially if you're tracking someone, a telephoto lens, a long focal length, so like an 85 or a 135, is a great way to actually bring speed and movement in, especially if someone's going past you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, then, like the drone shots in that film were mostly shot on the 85, which is actually quite unusual for a drone shot because it's normally ultra wide. But it gives you this amazing cinematic look because everything's rushing past the biker super fast, and it just emphasizes that. And then you also get the actual compression of the biker with the landscape. So it's just a totally different look than your typical wide angle lens. Yeah.
I really like using telephotos. Again, people think the wider you are, the more you'll capture. But if I want to tell a story of how immense a space is, of how big it is compared to the person, I like shooting long so that it compresses that space around him, and you can feel them in the context of that. I think that sometimes people use wide-angle lenses a bit too much because then it's the person that's imposing on that, right? Especially if you want to have a subject in a landscape. So I think this is coming to the end of us talking about primes specifically. We'll definitely touch on them again. But Luke, did you have any questions before we take a commercial break?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it all.
Now, this is a phenomenal commercial break in the fact that Orms is offering, Orms and Sony Alpha South Africa have a promotion running where you get 10% cash back on any purchases you make. Not any, there are terms and conditions, but purchases you make, it is these three. So Luke is pointing them out, so I'll read. But basically, come to Orms, purchase your Sony Alpha products, and you'll get 10% cash back. Now, this offer ends on the 22nd of October, so it's definitely not forever. But yeah, we are actually purchasing some stuff, and we'll definitely make sure to come through to Orms. And it's a great way to feel a bit better about the purchasing decision, knowing that you'll get cash back to buy more gear at the end of the day. Yeah, and hopefully that helps. It's definitely a weird time to be buying gear. It's a weird time to be thinking about expanding your arsenal. But these are creative tools, and hopefully we're going to give you some insight into knowing the exact creative tools you might need to shoot for your next project. So the next thing we're going to cover is zooms, right? And yeah, this is a great, zooms are a really powerful tool. They have their shortcomings. They're not as fast as primes are, but there are definitely some benefits to Luke and I where, I mean, this is us, right? We shoot really big content, but we are a small team, and even when we bulk up as a team, even when we're on larger sets, I think we've definitely learnt how to shoot as a small team, and zooms are a great tool in that arsenal. So this is something Luke shot. This is something Luke shot by himself. It's ridiculous that he shot this by himself. And one camera, one zoom. Luke, do you want to give us a preface before we jump in?
Yeah, so basically this was basically all shot on zoom lenses actually, and the only reason for that really is you need, when you're out in the field shooting without like models or actors, you need to be able to change a shot as quickly as you want. And you can't be switching lenses around all the time, especially in humid environments. So that's when a zoom comes in really in handy. And the main lenses for this would be the 24-70 f2.8, the 16-35 f2.8, and then also 70-200 f2.8. So you've got the full range.
Nice. Yeah, I think something that you were. This is a luxury yacht tour, so you have no. This is a set. It's very similar to a wedding, where you have no ability to dictate what anybody's doing at the time. You're really just there to capture things as they happen.
Yes.
Cool.
Okay, let's give it a watch.
Let's give it a watch. Sorry, I'm just going to start it again. Cool.
there's obviously a bit of drone shots mixed in here. And as you can see, they're all wide because small drones like the Mavic actually don't have a zoom lens on them.
I mean, if I'm watching this, it's ridiculous that, yeah, it's one person like running around this space. I think being on these tours, knowing how this works, all of these scenes that seem as if they must have gone on for hours, I know that you were in his spaces for like 20 minutes at a time, you know? And you're just running from end to end of the space, not getting in anyone's way, but also capturing everything that's going on. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's very weird because it's the complete opposite to a normal set where the whole everybody there is all based around getting the shot. Where on these shoots, basically nothing is based around getting the shot. So you need to be as discreet as possible and as quick as possible, and that's where zoom lenses really come in handy.
But I think I mean, we also interact with a space where we're shooting behind the scenes on a shoot, right? It's similar when you are shooting a wedding, right? It's very important, it's an incredible tool as a photographer to be invisible, right? To not be a presence on set.
Yes.
So the next example we have to pull from as well is, I mean, I love taking a camera to a wedding, but I'm wearing a suit, right? So I don't have a treasure trove.
I don't enjoy it.
But it's about just being able to run and gun. I don't know if we'll watch the whole thing, but I'm really happy to be able to be there to capture it, and also be quite versatile in doing it, you know? So this is all shot one lens, and so this is the 16 to 30, and also this is shot on an A7 III. So I was able to switch between cropped mode and full frame mode. So you extend your zoom range, right? You extend your focal lengths, even though you've also got zoom. And there's some nice shots that you can do there only on a zoom, right? I mean, there is a very clear technical distinction in the fact that you can't zoom in on a prime, right? So there are some stylistic benefits of using zooms, but you've got a great day in the life of a shooter where you had a long focal length zoom. And I think, yeah, let's just talk us through this day. Talk us through the fact. Did you have time to change lenses? Cool.
No, so especially with wildlife photography, you do get your primes as well, where you'll have like the 400 f2.8 and the 600 f4, but those lenses are literally the size and cost as much as a house. So having a zoom lens for wildlife photography is amazing, especially because you never know what the animal's going to do. They could run towards you, they could go further away, and you really don't want to miss a shot, and you really do not have time to change lenses when you're shooting wildlife. So that's why I actually generally prefer zoom lenses for wildlife photography. And yeah.
I mean, the thing to remember and share with is that you're also, a lot of people, you shoot from your car, you shoot from your safari vehicle, you're walking around with this, right?
Yeah,
so some people even rig, like prime telephoto lenses are a great tool. People will rig multiple cameras with different lenses, but they've got that next to them, right? You're walking around.
If you've got multiple camera bodies that you can leave in your car right next to you, then that's cool. But when you're hiking and walking around, then you want to be quick and agile.
Yeah, 100%.
And here's some great examples of all shot with the same lens, the 200 to 600 millimeter Sony lens. And if we go back to the first one, that one, the polar bears were very far away, so this was at 600 millimeters. But I mean, they were extremely far away, but he still managed to capture quite a good shot. And because that cliff was so far behind them, you actually get a bit of depth of field there, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And that's the number one. Just as a side note, when shooting animals, I like to get to their eye level, because I think that's when it really brings out their character and the best type of shot, because you get that depth of field and separation with them.
100%.
Yeah, and this next one is of a very cute walrus. And this one was at about 300 millimeters. So it was like right in the middle of the range. And I had it at 600, where you got a really nice tight shot of him, but I felt it didn't show enough of the scene. So I actually zoomed out a bit, and I preferred this shot because you get him in his environment, in the water, and his isolation as well. I really love getting animals on their own in their environment, which is really cool. And just one more thing about animal portraiture is when you have the background far away from the animal, it generally looks a lot better because you get that depth of field again. Whereas if he had a cliff right behind him or something like that, you wouldn't get that separation.
Yeah.
Then the next shot, so this is like the perfect example of why a telephoto zoom is so important. So normally when you're shooting foxes or animals like this, you're going to want to, it's a really small animal, it's like the size of a cat, and you're going to want a really tight focal length. But he actually started out about 30 meters away, and then there happened to be some food right in front of me. So he ran right up to me, and he must have been about 2 or 3 meters away for this. And I just needed to zoom out on the lens, and then I had this perfect framing between the rocks. And that's something I would have 100% missed the shot if I had a 400 millimeter prime or another prime like that. Then the next one is this is just a whale tail. And yeah, this is also a great example of, you've got the option of getting that tight compression with the iceberg behind him and the tail in the foreground, but I actually zoomed out a little for this. So this was on the wide end at 200 millimeters. And you get more of the landscape, and you get more of a visualization of where the animal is. And it's something, that's the other thing, is you can zoom really quickly in and out for these shots. So you can get multiple different takes, because you might not know which one you're going to prefer in the end. So that's where zooms are also super beneficial. Then this last one, second last one, is of a seal. And these guys are super aggressive. They are a bit scary, but luckily he was quite far away. And when you are around dangerous animals, having that extra telephoto length makes it really beneficial, because you don't need to go close by. And this was at 600 millimeters. And then the next shot is of these 3 different penguins. And for this, if I could only have a super telephoto, then I would only get 1 penguin in the shot. But because I had that zoom, I was able to zoom out to this would have been the widest at 200 millimeters. And I got all 3 of them. These were literally the only 3 penguins on that beach, and they're the 3 different species in Antarctica that are the most common. So it's not something you can prepare or set up or ask them to go back if you have missed the shot because you're changing lenses. You're just in there in the moment. You need to be able to zoom and get the shot.
Yeah. Cool. So we're going to go over the creative benefits of both. So, I mean, coming back to us, there are literal shots you can't get on primes, right, with a zoom. The fact that you can stay in one place and zoom in and out, you don't have to dolly. There are a lot of creative shots that you can only get on zooms, and that are really important to the language of cinema. Let's say you start out on your subject, you want to zoom out to reveal the whole context of where they are. Maybe you want to do the exact opposite, right? You start with an establishing shot, you zoom in to find your character there. Yeah, there really are, like, you can only do those on zooms. But again, I think that it's kind of, for me, it's primes are, I'm painting, you know, I'm making these very specific scenes, and zooms, I'm moving through the space. And lastly, for me, I think that a huge benefit of shooting primes, especially when you shoot one focal length for a whole project. I would really encourage you guys, if you are shooting, if you have the capacity to shoot like a creative project, try use one prime. And as you're moving through that project, you'll start seeing the world around you. I mean, don't lift your hands to your face at a photo frame, but you'll start seeing the world around you in that focal, right? And it's a great way to be more confident with your shot. I'm a huge believer in creativity through restriction. And if you're like, I'm going to walk out today, I'm only going to shoot on the 35, you'll start seeing the world from like a 35 focal length perspective. And it'll make you a lot more confident about the compositions, your compositions you make. And I have the ability to do this and completely change things. It makes me because then I have all the choice, right? So like I then am like making a marginally less good choice. Yeah. Any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, there's something really special about being forced to use one focal length, because like Hloni said, it really forces you to be creative and think outside the box, which is one of the that's one of the huge benefits of primes, in my opinion, which is not commonly thought of.
Yeah. I think from a like a very important thing that I've learned from a set running perspective and also a performance perspective, if I'm on a set that there's a lot of time crunch, right? If I'm in a space where it's going to take a while for my actor or my cast to build up to that good performance, I actually prefer to use zooms, because when if you're shooting, if you're the cinematographer, if you're the DOP, you generally set the cadence on set. And the second you pause to change a lens, I see the whole energy change. I see hair and makeup step in. I see costume come in. I see people shuffling around. And the worst thing is I'll get a performance with one lens and then I'll change it and I'll see the actor like lose it completely naturally, right? Because I've changed the energy on set. So even though I would sometimes I would be like, I'd love to shoot this on an 85, I'd love to shoot this on a 24. I would rather leave a zoom on there so that I can just quickly transition between those spaces and not have the cadence of set, not have that breath released, you know? And it's especially if you're running a fast set, even if you think you can change lenses quite quickly. I mean, we can change lenses quite quickly. Think about the ripples that sends throughout the set. And that's very similar. I'm not sure I would know how to shoot like portraits or like a performance-based piece, photos especially, on a DSLR, right? Because I love the ability that I can check playback. I can see my photos in the viewfinder, right? So the cast, and nobody necessarily knows I'm looking at photos. And I see that breath happen. I see that the same thing happen when people bring their camera down. So from a workflow perspective, also get used to being able to review your stuff in the viewfinder. And then that cast, they're never going to like release that, right? They're never going to know that you are checking through things. Thoughts from your side?
No, I think that's all good. Maybe
Cool.
we should move on to the Q&A.
Yeah, let's go to the Q&A, and then Luke's trying to avoid the fact that I'm trying to make him select one favorite lens for all time. Yeah, cool. So jumping into the Q&A, please feel free to ask any questions. Yeah, I mean, thinking of our favorite lenses, definitely post your questions in the comments. We were very happy to address those. We'll jump on them as soon as they pop up. But Luke, I'm going to force you to do it now. What would your favorite lens be if the desert island scenario, but you're not on a desert island, because I think that makes it too easy. Yeah, there are no more lenses being manufactured in the world. You have to choose one before the rest are destroyed. What focal length do you choose? Is it a zoom? Is it a prime?
That's very, very hard. So it's either a zoom or a prime.
I mean, it's one lens. So.
Okay. That's very. I don't think I could go. I don't think I could go for a prime lens, because yeah, if
Okay,
it's your only lens forever, then it would have to be a zoom.
Fair enough.
So maybe I would be tempted to say the 16 to 35 f2.8, because that's quite a big range and it's also fast. But I feel like that's too much in my comfort zone. So maybe I would say the 24 to 70. That's kind of your jack of all trades. If you're going to buy one lens, go for the 24 to 70. Yeah. So probably that one.
And I think what's great about the 24 to 70 is that within its range, it has that 50 millimeters, right? It has the human eye equivalent in focal length. So yeah, and then, okay, so pushing you further on that, then one focal length.
Ooh, one focal length. Is this without the zoom?
Yeah, no zoom, just, it's a prime now. It was two separate questions from the beginning.
Okay, then this is going to be a bit different, but I'm going to go for the 24 1.4.
Okay, okay. I mean, I'm judging you when I can make a completely separate decision.
Yeah, it's just such a beautiful lens. I've had it for like a year now, and it's pretty much become my favorite lens because number one, it's so small. Number two, it's super fast. It goes down to f1.4, so you can shoot in the dark with it. Then number three, it's actually got a really close focus distance. So even though you might be getting a bit of that distortion, you can still get a kind of macro-y shot with it. But yeah, that would be it. I would choose this lens.
Yeah.
What about you?
It's tempting. I was a griper about the 24 1.4, but we have been using it more and more, and Luke might have hypnotized me into doing that, but I've been very, very happy with it. But I think if I was going to choose one lens, it'd probably be the 35 1.4, just because that is, I mean, it's very close to, it's very close to that 50. But I do tend to, I love shooting wide, but I think that for natural, to emulate what the human eye sees, I think that that's the best thing to do. And there's some really good, I mean, it doesn't even necessarily need to be the 1.4. There's some great compact versions. The 35 2.8 is a phenomenally small version of that lens. How's the 12 24 2.8? How much time do you have for Luke to gush?
I remember when Sony brought it in, for us to try out. I think it was the only one. I was like a kid in a candy store. That's a really interesting lens because it's so wide that it like makes the whole world look very different, which can be super tempting.
Without distortion.
Well, yeah, there's no distortion.
Yeah.
But you will get the different perspective like we saw earlier.
But it's just like, for me it's weird. I think I've seen the world through wide-angle lenses, but I don't think I've seen the world that wide without that like fisheye effect. You know?
Yeah. So that lens is super tempting to just keep it on 12 all the time. But I think because 12 is such a specific focal length, they had to make it a zoom, and that's somewhere where you're not really going to get a 12 to f2 or 2.8 prime lens. So when you got a lens that's that specialized, to have it go between 12 and 24 is really helpful, because then you're not stuck to the ultra wide. But it is a beautiful lens, and there's a reason it's the only one of its kind, because it's like so difficult to make, and I'm guessing the technology wasn't quite there to produce it up until now. Yeah.
I mean, I think we've got some questions about not to harp on that lens. Now I'm encouraging the gushing, but what makes it like the first of its kind? I believe it's the fastest at that.
Yeah, it's the fastest 12 to 24 in the world. Yeah.
And it's also full frame. I mean, there have been that focal range and cropped, but yeah, I think that's a very important distinction. Yeah, I think also something to mention is that exercise I was talking about of shooting at one focal length. I've seen people like tape the zooms, the zoom ring on their zoom lenses for a weekend. So you can also do that.
I've
You don't have
never
to have a
seen that.
prime. You don't have to have a prime to do that exercise. So just to like block it from yourself, that's a great way to do that. Cool. So what is your most challenging shoot and why?
Yo.
I think the most challenging shoots are when you're not in control of the space. I think that there's
That's
a
true.
lot you can do, like even if it's a difficult shot, you know it's coming up and you know you can like try it again. But yeah, if I'm thinking about the things that stress me out the most, it's the ones where I know that there's only going to be one shot at this. So that's when
Like a wedding.
a
That's why
wedding,
we don't shoot
100%.
weddings.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah, weddings, behind the scenes on films,
Oh,
and
yes.
also like to a certain extent like performance, right? Like I think that there's this sense that you can run it through, and if you've got a professional actor, but if you're shooting a documentary film and someone's telling their own story, it's pretty disingenuous to get them and go back, sorry. So that's why I think we think about this so much, right? Know your focal lengths, know your lenses, so that before you're in that space, you know exactly how you're going to do it. I think it's the reason why they make you practice emergency braking, right? You don't want to figure it out in the moment. So
Yeah.
definitely practice with that. So yeah, definitely most challenging is when I have to
You know control
no
of
control.
what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we with the music video we shot, we had a horse, and
Oh yeah.
I think the horse was not a morning person, and that was just, I knew, like we had one shot at getting.
I don't think
this
you
shot.
do. I think
I didn't know.
when you were done, you were
Yeah.
like, I wish I had known that. I just had one shot.
But I think because we were prepped, we got it.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
fine.
Another question I'm getting my side is, what is a good first lens to get, right? Should you get a zoom first? Should
Yeah,
you get a
that's a good
prime
question.
first? I'm almost tempted to say get a prime first, because
That's a controversial
it is.
statement.
But I think I think that so many people, because of its price point as well, so many people got into shooting when they buy their first camera. They get a 50mm, because a 50mm 1.8 is generally inexpensive, and I think that it's a really good look. You're gonna be bummed if you're gonna be in scenarios where if you're getting a camera for like a holiday, right? Or if
Yeah.
you're getting it as a general purpose tool, then get a zoom, right? Sony has a great new kit lens with the A7C that I like genuinely want to get because of its size, and it would push me to have my camera with me all the time. But if your goal is to like be good at like photography and good at videography, I think a prime lens is a very good way of like breaking down that, like, I see a thing, now I'm going to turn it into a digital thing. Having that restriction is a great way to learn that translation as quickly and as aesthetically as possible. Clearly disagree with me, Lee.
No. That's actually a good point. I think they can also be cheaper, like the 50mm 1.8. That's a pretty good first lens because it's fast. You're gonna get that bokeh which everybody wants.
Yeah.
And it's going to challenge you to be creative. Whereas you get something like the 24 to 105, it can make you a bit lazy, and you've got so many options that you focus less on the shot and more on other things.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's so important to gain a level of instinct when you're shooting, right? Like you should look through your camera and obviously make sure you get the shot, but you should be walking around the world with a sense of how you would capture it.
Yeah. And then I think the ultimate question is primes or zooms.
Yeah.
And I think that's been one that's debated all the time. And if you've been watching this, you probably realize that there actually isn't an answer of which is best. It depends entirely on the scenario and the situation and what you're shooting and what look and feel you're going for, which I know is a super annoying answer, but
Yeah.
That's kind of the best answer. Like, we can't go without both. But if I had to use one forever and I couldn't choose, I would definitely go for primes, because there's something really special about that bokeh that you can get from primes. That, like, when I'm using a zoom, sometimes I'm like, man, I wish this was a prime lens, because I really want that look that you get, you know.
I think I would also go for primes, but it would be like you would obviously need multiple primes, but for me it's this. It's like getting into a new outfit, right? I rarely, if I have a prime on and I switch it, I know exactly what I'm doing to my shot. I know exactly like how I'm going to shoot it differently because of the different focal length. So I love the conscientiousness of choosing a prime, right? Where I know exactly the thing I'm trying to create. And then for me, I mean, it's not necessarily about the bokeh, but the fact that if the prime is the thing that once you're at that focal length, there is no limitation to when you're shooting, because you can shoot as dark as you want. You can separate your subject as far as you want. But I think that it's not that hard of a decision, and especially when we talk about getting something like a 50mm, that can definitely be helped by the fact that Orms is offering 10% cash back on Sony gear. So yeah, don't forget that. And
What is the code? I didn't see it earlier.
It is Orms Alpha. It's on the screen right now.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that that's a great way to lessen, the burden of making that decision, right? Come in,
very true.
grab a prime, grab that 50, or grab that 12 to 24 that Luke is infatuated with. But please don't grab all the 12 to 24s, because I think Luke will be very sad if he doesn't get one. Yeah, so that's Orms Alpha, and remember that promotion ends on the 22nd of October. So you've only got a few days to get it, and it's excluding 3 of the prime lenses, it would appear.
Only the ones that are going to cost you a house.
No, no, there's the 20mm. Don't. And I think you know exactly when you're going to get that lens, right? These lenses, the 600 to f4.
No, they're beautiful.
Yeah. I think Luke's incredulity is born of envy more than anything else.
Well, yeah, I'm also just annoyed that I didn't have this code when I was buying. I don't think I've ever bought a Sony product where they've had these promotions on. So.
Well, now you know. The window is there. Heed Luke's warning. Yeah, and I think that lensing. I'm really glad we got to talk about this, because I think that there is this focus on like the camera bodies, right? There is this, I mean, it's clear it's a spec sheet. You get excited. Most time a camera comes out, it can do a new thing, right? So the marginal returns on lenses are a bit opaque, but I mean, I'm not going to say they're 98% of cinematography, but they're a very important tool when you think about creating. And they're definitely thinking about lensing, being conscientious about lensing. I would put that very similarly to like having a great grasp of lighting as the first steps towards like true cinematography, right? I think that, people often, they define like what is the film look. I think the film look is, if I'm being honest, it's 200 incredibly experienced people doing their jobs very well.
Yeah.
But if you want to achieve the film look in your role as a cinematographer, or even just capturing a wedding or a family holiday, knowing your lensing is a very important thing to have before you set out on that journey.
Yeah. I think we covered everything.
Yeah, thanks for joining, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, feel free to follow us on Instagram. You can reach us at XCIV. That is XCIV. That's our production company. That's where we make big content in small teams, and we love using Sony gear. It's the only gear we've ever known how to make stuff with. So if this whole one lens scenario is an existential threat to my existence. Yeah. And we're always available. Come chat to the guys at Orms. They know as much about this stuff as we do. They're a great resource. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us online. You're welcome to visit the creative resources we have at Sony Alpha, and keep creating. Hopefully this is the thing that is going to give you tools to get out and make. I think that, I mean, yeah, the most important thing is go out and make stuff. The more you make it, the more you'll learn. And I think that choosing one focal length or choosing how one lens works is a great project. It's a great structure to get you to make something. So make it and send it to us so we can see it. I want those slips. And shoot it wide, because Luke loves wide lenses.
I do. I'm a sucker for the wides.
Thank you, guys. Thank